Welcome in, everybody, to week number 3 of Northern Indiana football. My name is Jeff Mahoney with Summit City Sports, and as always, we have Casey O'Boyle with Northeast Indiana Game Night. And Casey, we saw in week number 2, it's already starting with players and key players missing from games because of quarantine issues.
Yeah, it seems more prevalent this year than it did a year ago, Jeff, truthfully. And the protocols are different, I think, this year going into the season. And I think coaches are really juggling their two deeps and their communications. And, you know, I know it's impossible because I deal with it for 35 schools for game nights reasons. And I'm, publishing each week can be a bit taxing, as you can imagine, because we publish a couple days in advance. And my column this week in week 1 is about this very subject matter. And it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but by the same token, I guess it just speaks to the current state that we're in and how these coaches are really struggling from day to day, literally day to day, who's going to be eligible to play on Friday night, who isn't. I think some of the, protocols or the things that are in place sometimes are contradictory and make you scratch your head a little bit. And I suppose that's just par for the course right now where we are with COVID. And but more than anything else, I just wanted to spell out how because invariably we're going to have mistakes in game night. We're going to have anticipatory kids on the cover like we did last week. Bronte Johnson, Coach Ben Johnson over at Northside, assured me that he was playing on Thursday and Wednesday and Thursday, and then Friday, the day of, he was told he was ineligible. And so that kind of stuff happens. It's always happened through the years of publishing Game Night, whether it be a disciplinary issue or a late week injury. I suppose that's what happens when you have to print a couple days in advance. But more than anything else, it was, I just wanted to kind of let everybody know, hey, we're doing the best we can here. We're going to have some mistakes as far as personnel on Friday night, and we're going to try to keep up as best we can with respect to people's privacy and things like that. And most of the coaches have been really, really good because I'm peppering them with text messages and emails saying, hey, I heard this, or, is this kid back? What's going on? Again, not trying to dig up anything to give somebody a competitive advantage or disadvantage, or even to, I don't only need to know the reason why half the time. Is it, if it's a quarantine issue, is it an injury, discipline? I really don't personally care, Jeff. I just want to be accurate, and we want game night to be accurate. And so that's what this column was about. And, I took a few liberties, tongue in cheek, to have some fun. But to your point, some key guys missing last week. Bronte Johnson over at Northside comes to mind for sure. Jeff Becker over at Carroll, and we'll get to those games here in a little bit when we dissect things further. It's the next man up mentality, and football is that quintessential sport for that, because there's always injuries, there's always opportunities for other guys to step up, and last week we had that for sure.
Well, and Homestead was no different. One of their top defenders, Austin Keyser, was out last week, but it certainly didn't slow down Homestead as they rattled off a 59-14 win over Concordia at their place. Bishop Luers hosted Wayne, won at 47-26. Both of these teams are currently 2-0 in the SAC, along with Bishop Dwenger, and they are your game of the week on Northeast Indiana Game Night.
Yeah, definitely our hot ticket, our first legit hot ticket of the season. It feels like this game could go a long way, Jeff, in determining the SAC champion, even though it's just week 3. Bishop Luers last week kind of took care of business. They were a little sloppy, I think, early on at Wayne or against Wayne, but then they got things groove, and they lost Aiden Dennis to a wrist injury. The transfer from Huntington is I think a big loss, more on the defensive side of the ball for the Knights than anything else. But this team's a little bit deeper than they have been in recent years, and I think they'll be able to absorb that setback, that loss of Aiden Dennis. And then Homestead on the other side, wow, they just really put it to Concordia jumped out to a huge lead. First quarter, I think it was 28-0 and then 49-7 at halftime. Those are those kind of Homestead scores that I don't think we expected this early in the season, because the defense was so much further ahead than the offense. And but Peyton Slavin, the junior quarterback, starting to get comfortable. Again, we've talked a lot about Bill Skelton, the offensive coordinator over at Homestead, and how he really helps develop QBs. I think the same can be said about Jeff Stansky out at Bishop Luers. I mean, look at the progression of Jeff Becker. So arguably, these are the two best OCs in Northeast Indiana going head to head tonight in this contest. And, to me, Jeff, it's a matchup of Homestead's defense giving up negative yardage through 2 weeks of action. I mean, some of that is because they played Northrop and Concordia, and think about who Northrop and Concordia graduated, Demarius Cowan for Northrop and Amir Drew for Concordia. Those teams are not the same teams they were a year ago in terms of offense and running the ball. So some of that could be misleading, but by the same token, that defense is really, really good. That front three, at times those ends can be unblockable. Jackson Chrisman and Matt Miller are just fantastic. Chrisman leads the area in sacks with 4.5 sacks through 2 weeks of action. You got monster Johnny Waddell, 6'6", 380. I think they're shortchanging him a little bit. He looks like 4 bills to me. He's a large human being. He takes up a lot of space in the middle. Allows those linebackers, Evan Pearson and Max Schultz and Carter Koob. We highlight all three of those guys on the center spread this week too. Those guys can roam freely. They're all really solid linebackers. And then I'm glad you brought that up, Jeff, the secondary. This is the big question mark. Can these guys, and the Homestead defense is kind of a 3-3 stack, for lack of a better term, with 5 DBs. You got 2 corners and 3 safeties. It's really a defense kind of built to defend a team like Bishop Luers, who wants to throw it around a little bit more than your average high school football team. So it's going to be a really interesting night of action out at Homestead. And I think the key is, can Bishop Luers run the ball successfully with Sir Hale and a couple of their other running backs, RJ Hogue and Jarrell Thomas, contributed last week too. If the Knights can get, somewhere in the ballpark of 125 to 150 in rushing, I think they're going to be primed to win this game. But if Homestead shuts down their running attack, I think it's the Spartans' game to be had.
Casey, looking at Homestead, we said earlier that it usually takes about 3 weeks for them to find their groove. Their offense was just unstoppable last week. What a performance by the sophomore, Brett Fuchs, who carried 8 times for 102 yards, averaging 12.8 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns. Kind of remind you of Braden Hardwick and the numbers he used to have. Nate Anderson went off last week, 5 receptions, 129 yards with 2 touchdowns. Gage Sparrow was huge with a touchdown rushing and a touchdown receiving. So the Homestead offense is certainly kind of rearing into form. And I think they're going to be really scary here in the next couple of weeks.
Well, you're exactly right, Jeff, because you sit back and you think, okay, who's going to be that guy toting the rock? We thought initially maybe Desmond Smith, but they're using him a lot in special teams and on defense. We thought maybe Cam Johnson, he might be that guy. And then out of nowhere, Brett Fuchs, 102 yards a week ago. Maybe it'll be by committee, and that might be the best way to go about it. And because they do run a lot of single back stuff out at Homestead, and they still want to think of themselves as a spread offense, a passing, quick strike offense. But yeah, Gage Sparrow had a great game. Nate Anderson, as we predicted in game night last week, would have a big game. He certainly did. I think Nate may be the most complete wide receiver in the area. And it's just a matter of designing plays to get those guys the ball quickly, whether it be a jet sweep, a reverse, a quick out, a slant. They're doing all that kind of stuff to get the ball out of Peyton Slavin's hands quickly to utilize those athletes in space. But yeah, really impressive offensive performance last week. And as you said, it only took week 2.
So Carson Clark, number 1 in the SAC, Brody Glenn, number 2, Sir Hales at number 3 in rushing. Luers offense has certainly picked up where they left off from the end of last season. Seems like one of the other key determining factors in this game will be Luers has a lot of players going both ways, where Homestead may have some of the best depth in the city along with Bishop Dwenger.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And also just overall size. I mean, you look at the Homestead's offensive line, Jeff, 260, 260, 230, 285, 225. Not a huge offensive line, but definitely pretty representative of a 6A school that is a perennial top 10 team. You look over at Bishop Luers, their front four defensively, 186, 191, 217, 193. How's that factor in too? And to your point, all those two-way players, a lot of guys playing key spots like Antoine Lake comes to mind, has to get minutes on both sides of the ball. Nick Thompson, Sir Hale will play some defense. Will that ultimately wear down Bishop Luers late in this game? I don't know. We're going to find out for sure. But I think another matchup is Luers defense. I think they're vastly improved over a year ago. Losing Aiden Dennis is a big loss because he was really doing great things at defensive end. So the Knights are going to have to, fill in there. I think RJ Hogue's going to get the start in his place. And then their linebackers at Luers, Evan Linker, Mason Daring, and Devon Doty, all really hard-nosed Bishop Luers linebackers. They're not real big guys. They're not overly quick, but they're tough and they tackle well in space. They've got to keep Homestead's ground game under wraps tonight for them to have a chance to pull off the upset.
Yeah, Devon Doty ranks among the top in the SAC in sacks. And last week, Evan Linker leading the team with 8 tackles. So certainly should be a great game out there at Homestead. Next game we'd like to look at is Carroll and Northside. Casey, both of these teams or teams we were talking about had maybe hit the hardest with the COVID stuff. Here you see a picture of Owen Sheely, the junior quarterback for Carroll, who had a fantastic game. The offense was really running on all cylinders last week against Snyder. And for Northside, playing without Tay Johnson, then Brashawn Bassett went hurt. Their backup quarterback, Williams, was out with a concussion, so they had to go to Rodney Woods to play QB for him in that game against Dwenger. It was a tough loss, 39-13 at Bishop Dwenger, while Carroll got their first win of the season, 29-28. Another great game for the Snyder Panthers there in week number 2, but Carroll squeaking out the 1-point victory.
Yeah, another fantastic finish. I mean, I'm sure Snyder is not going to miss Jamison Coverstone next year. I mean, think about what that kid's done. Last year against Snyder, 10 catches, 240 yards, player of the week for Summit City Sports in GameNight. This year, same matchup, 10 catches, 229 yards, 3 touchdowns, including 1 late in the first half, and then the game winner inside a minute to go. They're probably, the defensive coaches over at Snyder are probably having nightmares about Jamison Coverstone. He's had unbelievable performances. It makes you wonder how they weren't able to just say, just double team him. He was so wide open on some of those throws late in the game that it leaves you scratching your head a little bit. But again, they don't have to see him in the playoffs, so I'm sure they'll be glad to know that they don't have to face Coverstone anymore. But getting back to Owen Sheely, my goodness, what a performance by the junior quarterback, to come in, on short notice and step in a big spot like that, especially after Jeff losing week 1 to Bishop Luers. They did not want to start 0-2 to face whatever I think most people felt was the team to beat in the SAC and the Snyder Panthers, and go over to Spuller Stadium. We called it the spoiler over at Spuller. What a win for Carroll. I gave our coach of the week honor to their entire coaching staff because I thought that was really impressive what the Chargers did. But hats off to Owen Sheely. I mean, what a performance by a kid put in a tough spot. Had really, really good numbers. I believe threw for over 200 yards, 273 yards, somewhere in that ballpark. And then you had, but I don't think he's going to Wally Pip Jeff Becker. I mean, let's be honest. If lest we forget what happened a year ago between Northside and Carroll, tonight's matchup, Jeff Becker threw for a school record 460 yards and 8 touchdowns. So I think Owen Sheely is going to probably go back to his backup role. Jeff Becker, I got the thumbs up from the Carroll coaches that he was back in the saddle and playing tonight. So Do I think he's going to throw for 460 against Northside? No, I don't. But he's definitely not losing his starting spot. Let's put it that way.
And Casey, looking at Northside, just a tough way to march into Shields Field, not having all your best players. Their performance in week 1 was truly inspiring for this young team. But for Brashawn Bassett to go down, for Rodney Woods to have to come in and play quarterback without a lot of his weapons, I mean, him not being at wide receiver is losing enough right there. And obviously we talked about Tay Johnson. But Northside looks like they'll have Johnson back this week against Carroll. Bassett's going to be a game time decision. I think they're expecting him to suit up. Do you like Northside's chances a little bit better against the Chargers if these guys are playing?
Of course. And another fellow that missed significant time last week was Jordan Turner, who had that big hit against by the free safety from Dwenger. Adam Lee was our big tag of the week. They lost at that point for that short spell. They lost their top 3 receivers. As you mentioned, Rodney Woods was thrust into duty at quarterback and really performed admirably. But they were shorthanded, and you could just tell at that point watching the game, this wasn't going to fare well for Northside. It changed everything they wanted to do. Jonte Lambert, however, really ran the ball hard. Junior running back is starting to make a name for himself, and he's the kind of kid that has a little bit of shimmy in his run, but also that power at the point of contact. I really like him, and I think they're going to want to shorten the game tonight. I mean, last year these two teams accumulated for over 1,100 yards, Jeff, total offense between the two of them. The game took almost 4 hours to play. So clearly Northside wants to shorten the game. They can't give up 76 points or whatever it was a year ago. They need to keep this thing in the 30s or 40s. And they got to hope Brashawn Bassett can play and be healthy. That I anticipate that they would just use him on one side of the ball. You'd have to give up that defensive end spot and utilize him at quarterback and try to limit his contact so he doesn't take another shot to the shoulder. But that to me means quick strike stuff, maybe some rollouts where they can kind of seal the edge a little bit to protect him, and just tell him, hey, you get out of bounds, you throw the ball away, you do whatever you got to do, but we can't afford to have you go out if indeed he is the guy behind center tonight. Talking to Coach Johnson, it sounds like he is planning, like you said, to dress, but I think they need him to play, and they need him at quarterback more than they do defensive end. So, but to answer your original question, yeah, absolutely they have a chance. We've set the spread at 16 points. That may be a little too high. We'll find out. Carroll right now has to be surging and feeling really good about themselves because of the week 2 win over Snyder. Northside, what a gauntlet to start. Snyder, Dwenger, and Carroll to open up their season. The legends, again, limping in just a little bit because they're not 100%, but having Tay Johnson back will be huge on both sides of the ball.
Casey, I was just overly impressed with the defensive front seven from Carroll last week. That was the story with Snyder in week number 1. But I think Dylan Bennett looks like he might be the best middle linebacker in the SAC. Currently leads the sack and interceptions with 2. He had 8 tackles last week. The sophomore Braden Steely from his free safety position, he is a real star and just a sophomore. I mean, he already owns it. Like, he's going to play with the big boys. And their defensive ends, Liam Ottenweller has been a 3-year starter, along with Aaron Jackway. These are some big boys, and they really stuffed up the running lanes for Tyrese Brown, along with Langston Level last week, early on in that game when Carroll was able to jump out on Snyder early.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think a lot of those guys are unheralded. Dylan Bennett, I mean, he looks the part. He looks like he should be playing Saturdays somewhere. I mean, he's just a really fine-looking athlete, muscular. He had the pick in week 1 against Luers that almost could have been pivotal, and then another one last week. And those defensive ends, Jackway and Ottenweller, really stout. They do a really good job funneling everything back to the interior, maintaining their leverage. And then I think the back end guys don't get enough credit out at Carroll either. But this young sophomore, Braden Steely, younger brother of Tucker Steely, really, really good football player. As I've said before, the freshman and sophomore classes out at Carroll are really, really good. And there are a few freshmen that we're going to probably see get sprinkled into some action as the season unfolds. So good things ahead for Carroll. Doesn't mean that this particular team with juniors and seniors leading the way is not stout, because they definitely have plenty of talent.
Yeah, two plays that really stuck out in my mind in that game was Braden Steely's open field hit on Tyrese Brown, where he actually knocked the big running back, and then Dylan Bennett with that one-handed interception was a really athletic play.
Yeah, you're right, Jeff. Both those plays, in my mind, stick out as well. Mostly, I think the sophomores hit against Tyrese Brown, the big, strong running back from Snyder, who was our week 1 player of the week. I don't think he was anticipating that the young Steely had that much punch in his, in his back pocket, but he really laid the wood.
Well, the next game we want to look at is Snyder looking to get back on track, heading to Concordia, who had that big loss last week against Homestead. You got to believe that this is going to be a bounce back game for Snyder.
Well, you would think so. This is one of the more perplexing starts to a season for a team that had so many guys coming back that I can remember in quite some time. I mean, I think, again, it just speaks to the level of competition and parity in the city. But, coming off that thrilling win week 1 with the Talamentes kick, you just can't help but think, was that just so emotionally exhausting for Snyder that they maybe overlooked Carroll just a little bit, especially once they found out that Jeff Becker was not going to be suiting up for the Chargers. These are 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, Jeff, and so that certainly could have played a part in it. But you got to give credit to Carroll, and I'm sure Coach Dittman would, and he did. They made plays when they needed to down the stretch. You think about Snyder, Jeff. Think about their late half miscues, bad fortune, whatever you want to call it, in 2 weeks of action. Not only in the first half, but the end of games. You had the 98-yard missed field goal returned by Bronte Johnson to finish the half in week 1. And then they gave up the lead on a deep pass late in week 1. Talamente's kick saved the day. Otherwise, they'd be 0-2. And then last week, Coverstone had a touchdown for Carroll late in the first half, I believe about a 65-yarder. And then, of course, Carroll just methodically went down the field last week inside a minute and scored again. Owen Shealy to Jamison Coverstone. The Snyder people have to be sitting there chewing their fingernails now inside a minute to go, whether it's the first half or the end of the game. So if this thing ends up being close, you got to wonder, okay, where's Snyder at mentally? Because there have been some breakdowns in those crucial moments when you're trying to close out a half or close out a game. This is a good opportunity for Snyder. They're big favorites against Concordia to maybe clean some of that up and get a little confidence going into the middle part of their schedule. But yeah, this is an opportunity also for Concordia to bounce back, I think, because they just were shell-shocked last week by Homestead. After a pretty impressive week 1 win over Southside, the Cadets just didn't play very good. They didn't really match the intensity that Homestead brought early on in that game, and before they knew it, they were out of it. So, Eli Maddox, he's done a nice job. He's amongst the leaders in the area passing the ball. You've got the Johnson and Johnson boys. Robert and Dontrell, both really capable athletes. I really like Jace Parnan, what he's doing, really on both sides of the ball and special teams. He's a big play guy for them on offense as well. But they've got to be able to run the ball a little bit and do just a little bit more between the tackles. They've got the ability, but they just haven't committed to it yet. I think that has to come out tonight against that Snyder front 7, which is devastating if they're going to have a chance, or front 8 rather.
Yeah, and the lack of rushing might also speak to Homestead's defense, who held Northrop to, I think it was minus 19 yards rushing in week number 1. So, but yeah, just 1 yard tallied for Concordia. Shouldn't be much easier up against that defensive front 7 of Snyder. Talamantes did go out of the game last week. DJ Moore did not start the game. The star offensive lineman came in about the second half. He was a huge difference maker. I mean, you can totally tell when he's in there, helps those running backs. Tyrese Brown, another nice game, 23 attempts, 131 yards. I'm telling you, it was tough for Snyder to run the ball there in that first quarter without big DJ Moore on the field.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I agree with you. I think when he's on the field, it may be the area's best offensive line, certainly in that conversation. And then Langston Level had a really nice night. I think that's what Snyder wants to do is I think Coach Tippmann likes having, two running backs to kind of keep guys fresh and then also to keep people guessing on the defensive side of the ball. We just now we need to see that Snyder passing game evolve just a little bit more. I think this is a good opportunity tonight for Luke Halpert, the junior quarterback, to have a really big night. You got Key Billingsley, who I think is primed for a breakout game. I wouldn't be surprised if he passed the century mark tonight. Kamari Juarez is another top flight receiver. So they've got some weapons. They like to use their tight ends, Carter Wortman and Lincoln Ferks, both capable guys in the seam. So I'm expecting Snyder to come out tonight, try to pound the ball in typical Snyder fashion, but also to get Halpert's confidence up a little bit with some design rollouts and some quick hitters, get those numbers moving in a positive direction for their passing game. Conversely, as I mentioned earlier, Concordia, I think, has to run the ball. They have to have a concerted effort to try to do more between the tackles and shorten this game a little bit. They can't put it all on Eli Maddox.
Well, Casey, what a game last week for Southside as they pull off the victory, 26-14 against Northrop. An outstanding game by Anthony Thomas, who you have pictured here. Did a great job running the ball. 3 touchdowns by Jalen Lattimore. They had a hard time passing it, but Quincy English did get a rushing touchdown. They're going to take on the Saints. Bishop Dwenger, 2-0. You got Colin Vance here pictured. What a great first game for him. I believe he had 8 tackles and 2 interceptions from his safety position. But Bishop Dwenger, you kind of expect to roll in this one?
I do. I think they're probably at least 3 or 4 scores better. But again, high school football is a strange cat. And if you don't show up on Friday night, there's enough good football players over at Southside. They could definitely spring the upset. I mean, you mentioned Jalen Lattimore. Every time I hear his name, I can't help but think of Clubber Lang. Lattimore. He's got a Lattimore in him. And if I'm Anthony Thomas, I'm going to Coach Tiny Lee and saying, hey, you know what? I got 131 yards and 18 carries. Why does Jalen Lattimore have all 3 of my touchdowns? He's getting the ball at the goal line, which I like. He's a big, powerful back, is Jalen Lattimore. He's already got an offer to Toledo in his back pocket. I think more could come this year. And they're doing some good things there. Again, I think shortening the game a little bit with that ground attack. Quincy English, the quarterback, did not have a very good game a week ago. But that's, I think, credit to Northrop's defense that stood its ground early on. Northrop was missing a lot of guys. So you wonder how, that affected the outcome. But credit to Southside. What a great win. They were our team of the week. We brought them some pizzas from B. Antonio's on Wednesday. And really, really nice win for the Archers. Now, can they carry that momentum into tonight's game? Remains to be seen. Another kid that we need to mention is Trevor Hapner. My goodness, 6 tackles, 2 QB sacks, and 2 block punts. What a night for Trevor Hapner. He also made our PT 40 along with Jalen Lattimore from Southside. And those are 2 really good players. They're almost unblockable when they're on defense. And they're usually opposite sides of one another on the edge. And so the Saints will have to try to manufacture some plays between the tackles, see if they can't run the ball a little bit. I expect the Bishop Dwenger to try to get that passing game going a little bit. It's just, it looks a little off to me right now. A lot of vertical routes. I'd like to see quicker things. You got to get Rocco Sioka involved. He's arguably the best receiver in the area. If it's not Nate Anderson, it's Rocco Sioka. And I think you got to find a way to get him the ball. He's 6'5". He's really good at high pointing the ball. So whether it be comeback routes or slants or seam routes, whatever it may be, line him up in the slot once in a while to throw off the defense. You got to get him at least 6, 7, 8 touches a game, I would think, especially a game like this where you're a heavy favorite. So I expect to see some more of that. You got touchdown Teddy Steele, 5 TDs in 2 weeks. We have a nice picture of him in game night tonight. So the Saints are starting to they're just kind of hanging around a little bit. It still feels like their defense is way ahead of the offense, but we know they've got plenty of parts on that side of the ball. It's just now a matter of putting it all together, getting that ground game a little bit more consistent, and then finding ways to get more big plays in their passing game. Doesn't have to always be vertical routes, deep balls downfield. It can be quick hitters. It can be comeback routes, things of that nature. And then that will open up those big plays downfield.
Can't say enough about what Guy Tiny Lee has done over there at Southside. There is some enthusiasm in that program. And like you said, Hafner and Jalen Lattimore, I mean, as a combo on defense, those guys are really troublesome. Casey, looking at Jack Tittman, who's a Division I recruit, I believe at tight end, but he's really shining at defensive end this year. Like you said, the Dwenger passing game has yet to really get going, but Jack Tittman is really getting it done at the defensive end position. He ranks number 2 in the in sacks.
Yeah, I think he's got 3 on the season, and he's kind of taken away one half of the field. The Saints a lot of times like to take him to the wide side of the field, and I think he right now, we talk about being unblockable. He looks to be unblockable at times as well, and just wreaking havoc in the backfield. He gives them that stabilizing force in the defensive trenches that we felt like maybe they didn't have going into the season. Definitely doing a great job there is Jack Tittman. And then those linebackers continue to flow and make plays. I mean, Gavin Groves is having a great season. You already mentioned Colin Vance. They missed him week 1. He comes back and has 2 interceptions. Cole Carey, yeah, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Cole. He's just kind of a tough, hard-nosed CYO type kid who performs week in and week out, along with Mitchell Vogelweed. And then you've got on the back end Adam Lee, who had that monster hit last week. It was a clean hit, and he plays with a ton of passion. He may be, I mean, I know some folks think that he may be Bishop Dwenger's best overall player, and that's saying something because they've got some good ball players again this year. So, but he's definitely a stabilizing force on the back end. And so Dwenger's got all the parts on the defensive side of the ball. Things are starting to click for him at all 3 levels. But they, you talk to Coach Garrett, he still thinks they've got a long ways to go, and they got to clean up some things in all 3 facets.
Casey, have you heard anything? Is Jack Tittman definitely a tight end at the next level, or could anybody be looking at him at defensive end?
Yeah, what I'm hearing is people are looking at him as a defensive end. I know he had a good trip down to Louisville, and some other places here this summer. It's just a matter of where, but without question, I mean, he kind of fits the mold either way. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see more recruiting hype on the defensive side of the ball as the season unfolds.
And Casey, back over at Southside, your impressions of Tiny Lee and the way his team is performing after 2 weeks. I just feel like we haven't seen Southside play this hard since maybe 8 years ago when they had guys like Donovan Clark.
Yeah, they're definitely playing with a lot of passion. They've got some good football players. Let's make no mistake. You got to have players to compete in this league. And Coach Lee knows he does, but he's got a good passion for his players, and they've got a good fight behind them. They believe in one another. And again, talking to them at our preseason photo shoots, the whole concept of just kind of shortening the game. He wants to run. And I get that. But within the context of managing the game, and the way they methodically kind of put Northrop away late last week, I thought was really indicative of where they've come as a program and the belief that they have in one another. That passing game is going to need to do a little bit more tonight against Bishop Dwenger. And again, they've got some weapons. I think they've got some weapons that we haven't heard about yet that could break out conceivably. But again, it's against a really good Dwenger defense. So if it's not this week, it could be another week. But again, manage the game, try to keep it close, see if you can't steal something in the second half. The key is special teams, which last week Southside won in their 12-point victory over Northrop. They won that battle. Will they do it against Bishop Dwenger? Coach Todd Ellinger is special teams coordinator, one of the best in the area. That's a daunting task for Southside. Can they win that 1/3 of the game? The special teams battle remains to be seen.
Well, Casey, one of these teams is going to pick up their first win of the season when Wayne travels to take on Northrop. The Generals, one of the top running backs in the SAC, Lamarian Nelson, and he's done that against Bishop Dwenger and Bishop Luers. So, I mean, he stands the test right there. Wayne is still waiting for Aiden Meeks and Sean Collins to really break out and find their groove here in their senior seasons. And once again, over at Northrop, dropping that game last week to Southside, you got to believe that Coach Dorfler and crew are going to be ready to go against this Wayne team.
Yeah, no doubt about it. 0-2 versus 0-2. You've got, two coaches that have been around a while in these parts. Coach Haydock, now coaching his third team in Northeast Indiana over the last, 20 plus years. You've got Jason Dorfler, a legacy coach that's been now at Northrop for 8 seasons or so. Well-respected coaches. They're not happy being 0-2. I think you'd have to give Wayne a little edge in the schedule department, having played both Bishops already. They, the Generals, you're asking a lot to open up with Bishop Dwenger and Bishop Luers, especially this year, the way both teams are playing. But they want to run the ball. And last year, they racked up ridiculous rushing yards in this game against Northrop. Swami actually predicted an upset special last year when everybody else in town was picking Northrop, and the Generals came through 42-33 was the win in week 3. But last year, my goodness, 436 yards for Wayne on just 51 carries. And Chris Thomas, who played at Northrop to start his career, 302 yards on 30 totes. He reminds me a lot of Lamarian Nelson, similar types running style. He had a little bit of fumbleitis last year, you'll recall. Lamarian seems to be holding on to the rock a little bit better. He's primed for a huge season. He's kind of more of that pound version of their ground and pound. And then you look at Sean Collins, a little bit more of that traditional scat back. I think they need to use him even more in the passing game, which I think we'll see more going forward. But between those two guys, if they have a big night rushing the football, I think Wayne gets the job done against Northrop. But should be a fantastic game. On the other side, talking about the Bruins, they had just such a hard time running the ball week 1 in that loss to Homestead. And you couldn't help but think, okay, is this because of the loss of Demarius Cowan? Is this just because or Homestead's defense is really that good against the run? I think it's more the latter. I think they've got capable guys. Amarian Collins had 3 carries for 40 yards last week, and Michael Neighbors had some nice gains as well. So they've got some ball players there. And again, you talk about attrition. A lot of these guys are playing both ways. And early in the season, I think that can really wear a team down or a certain side of the ball down late in contests. I think that's kind of what we saw last week out at Southside. But this should be a fantastic game. Can Northrop throw the ball with Roosevelt and Norfleet, get some big plays with C.J. Davis and Jaden Smink and Dane Kilby, 3 really, really talented receivers. I did hear from Coach Dorfler that Jelante Hinton is back. He did not play last week. He's the outstanding sophomore defensive end who just wreaks havoc and could see some time on the offensive side of the ball as well. So I think both teams are pretty healthy. I do know Wayne is missing one player. I won't mention his name, but they're missing one player on the defensive side of the ball that could be a difference maker. But again, this should be a 4-quarter game. I'm anticipating Wayne with some really good rushing numbers. I'm anticipating Northrop with some really good passing numbers. And it could be the kind of situation, one big turnover, one big miscue, or maybe one big special teams play late in the game will decide it.
Okay, so you got Wayne winning this one by 6. Going back to their head coach, Sherwood Haydock, who's in his 2nd year at the school. He's been coaching for 34 years, has a state championship under his belt, along with a runner-up finish with Woodland. Do you think Coach Haydock is a Hall of Fame type coach?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's, you look at what he's done at every stop. Wayne, the jury's still out. I think he's got some work to do there, but it's early in this campaign. But what he did at Harding, turning that program around and getting them to the next level, was really impressive after some of his predecessors kind of set the table. And then certainly at Woodland, his short stay there did some great things. Absolutely. I mean, he's a long-term guy. It's been around forever. I'll never forget when he got the job at Harding. Coach Marty or Marty Farrell was the athletic director. It was a friend of mine. I actually set up a meeting with Sherwood just to talk to him about game night. I brought some old copies of game night, and I just remember his eyes lighting up. He's a football guy. He loves football. He loves high school football. He loves the X's and O's. I think he's a fantastic ambassador to the game. He's kind of one of those guys that literally I will send a text and say, hey, game night's out at your ticket booth or something like that. And I will see him before I leave the parking lot. Like, I'm probably getting him in trouble right now. He walks right out of the classroom and goes right and grabs his game night. So I got to show you my helmets. These are 2 fresh ones this year. This is Northrop. I love this logo with the claws. If you're going to have a paw and you're a Bruin, you better have claws with it. So that's important. I got that from Jason. And then this one here, this was one really surprises me because speaking of Coach Haydock, he loves his decals. He loves logos. I mean, I think about some of the logos at Harding. I swear, Jeff, they changed every season. I mean, he had like the Ravens logo one year. He had the Eagles logo with the wing. I mean, every year it seemed like he would change his logo. He even did it at Woodland a few times. Kind of surprised me this year when he gave me this. I asked him, I said, well, are you going to give me some decals to slap on here? And he's like, no, this is what we're going with. So either that or they're on back order. I don't know. But I do kind of like it. It's kind of an old school colonial blue. I don't know. I kind of like it. So I was excited to bring these 2 guys to today's show.
Casey, just real quick, I'd like to finish up here with our final 3 games. This might be game of the week number 2, if you will. 2-0 Leo traveling to 2-0 Norwell. What a great start for both of these teams. You see Big Mason Sharon here pictured. Seems like he's averaging about 20 yards per carry right now. And then Brody Bolin with Norwell, the junior offensive lineman, defensive, and kicks for the team. He does a little bit of everything. His dad's a softball coach over at St. Francis, so is ingrained in the Fort Wayne area. This kid is one of the top offensive linemen in the state, and just a junior. But what do you like about this game here? It seems interesting. Does Norwell have what it takes to stop or slow down this Leo rushing attack?
That's the question. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, Leo, what they've done now, granted, at Woodland and Angola, I don't think either of those teams are on par with Norwell right now. But the way they've jumped out, Jeff, I mean, it's like 28-0, 35-0, 42-0, boom, 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 boom. And it's not because of quick strike passing plays, as we know. They don't throw it much, or they haven't yet. But look at some of these numbers. Ethan Crawford last week, 2 carries, 95 yards, both touchdowns. Caden Miller, 2 carries, 89 yards, both touchdowns. I mean, that's like Metro Pal football stuff, right? Where you just got one team that's dominant over another. Carson Hepner, 2 carries, 64 yards, 1 score. Mason Sharon, 2 carries, 52 yards, 1 score. I mean, it's ridiculous. So they're not having to methodically go down the field and chew up clock. They're handing the ball off to a guy in that massive offensive line. And again, Landon Livingston and DJ Allen are monsters. They're great linemen. You can make a strong case that they're the 2 best linemen in the area. Landon Livingston on his way to West Virginia, and of course DJ Allen, recruited as defensive end to Rutgers. He's a legit 6'8" too. When I saw him at our photo shoot, I couldn't believe how much taller he's gotten. He had a huge game last week as well. DJ Allen did. It seems like every week he comes up with some big plays, sacks, fumble recoveries. He had 3 QB hurries a week ago. But left tackle Colin Butler, Coach Sauter made it a point to highlight him. 6'3", 270 has really, really improved in the trenches. So it's more than just those 2 big guys. They've got 5 solid offensive linemen. And they're just, again, the holes are so gaping, Jeff. I think I probably could average close to 8 yards a carry. I mean, I know that's saying a lot, but I think if I could just get the ball and not lose, run out of my breath past the line of scrimmage, I might be able to trip over a couple of guys and make it 7 or 8 yards. That's how massive these holes are. You talk about Norwell, Brody Bolin, also a very good baseball player. Really liked him. There's a good shot of him at our photo shoot. Tough kid, one of the best junior football players in the state, in my opinion. He made our PT 40. You got Luke Graft, at running back. John Colbert both had over 100 yards a week ago. So they've got some capability, but that was against Heritage. This is against Leo. This is a different monster for Norwell. And they play a ton of young guys. I think they only start one senior on the offensive side of the ball. Leo's defense is really, really good too. Their offense gets a lot of the headlines because these running backs just churn out huge numbers, but their defense is really, really tough. Norwell got beat last year in this game 17-0, and Leo had a few turnovers. Leo's the senior dominated team. Yes, on paper, you would think this game should be close just looking at the records and the scores. But I gotta tell you, Leo right now looks to me like a team on a mission. This is a tall task for Norwell. Can they do it? Absolutely. They're at home at the Courtyard. They're going to be fired up. They're underdogs. But I really like what Coach Sauter's doing with this Leo team. They could be the best team in the area.
Yeah, I remember last year with Leo, it seemed like with the running game, it was all about Caden Miller. Then he got hurt a little bit, never came back to 100%. Looking at these numbers here, does Leo even need to pass the ball to keep these guys healthy? I mean, they have so many capable running backs. Mason Sharon and Caden Miller, I gotta believe, are the top two, maybe the two best running backs of this group. But what do you think, Casey? The way they spread the ball out, seems like these guys are going to be healthy. And offensive linemen, they always prefer to run back block over pass blocking.
Yeah. Well, at some point, I mean, as much as it is to keep your key guys healthy, to spread out those totes, it's also to keep defenses guessing. They run that stack T packet in formation. And so at that point, the quarterback, Jackson Barber, he's kind of a magician back there, sleight of hand, who's getting the ball, who isn't. So a lot of it is predicated on deception. But having that versatility is huge. Make no mistake. I think, though, and we said it last year, and it proved to be true, they've got to have a little bit more of a threat to pass the ball. I mean, this game could be over in an hour and a half tonight, because last week, I think, well, there it is, 0 for 1 for Leo. And I think Norwell was 1 for 3 for -5 yards. So going into this game, these two teams had -5 passing yards on 4 tries last week. So if that's going to be the recipe tonight, this game could be over in a heartbeat. But to get back to your original point, yes, it's a great problem to have with all those backs. They're all very capable. Ethan Crawford's really, really good. I would put him right up there with Mason Sharon and Caden Miller. Carson Hepner is no slouch himself. I mean, they're really, really good high school running backs. Then you've got to look at the passing. You're going to have to develop something, whether it's a boot rollout type thing, where you put one of those running backs out in the flat and maybe you roll your tight end across the formation. Ryland Crawford is listed as a tight end. They do a lot of, like I said, packet in formations. At some point, they're going to have to do more of that, I think, if they want to get to their ultimate goal of making it to Indianapolis and playing for a state championship. With teams like East Noble and others lurking in the northern half of the state. It caught them last year in that 10-0 loss to East Noble Knights. Tonight against the Norwell Knights down at the Courtyard, this could be a great opportunity to sprinkle in some of that stuff. Maybe they knew they were big favorites against Woodland and Angola, and they're saving some of it. We heard during the offseason it was something, a point of emphasis out at Leo. We haven't seen it yet. I'd like to see it, because I think that's just going to open up things even more for that ground game. And I think you need to rep it a little bit more if it's going to be part of your game plan in the postseason. If it's not, if you're like, hey, this is our DNA, and knowing Coach Sauter, he's an offensive line guy by trade, in his past, he wants to pound the ball. That's always been kind of his MO. And if that's the way they want to go about it, have at it. I personally think you've got enough capable players there. Ryland Crawford is the big name that comes to mind, that you've got to try to find a way to keep people off balance just a little bit with some semblance of a passing game if you want to reach your ultimate goal. So me personally, I'm kind of feeling like this is a good opportunity to get 5 to 7 to 10 pass attempts tonight for Jackson Barber, but we'll see. I could be wrong. He could be, 0 for 0, 0 for 1 again, and they might rush for, 350 or 400 yards. You just don't know. But they've got some ball players, and they've got an offensive line that loves to push people around.
Either way, this game's going to go a long way in determining the NE8 champion. You see East Noble still undefeated with a 1-0 record, so not having played 2 games so far. And Jakar Williams going out last week against Eastbrook really hurt New Haven. But for Norwell, wow, a lot of excitement with this football team, and they really haven't had this much excitement since the Pearson Harnish days.
I agree. I think Norwell might be a year away from being really, really good. Again, that's not to say they can't pull off an upset tonight at home against Leo, but to me, they're still a little on the young side. I think they're going to be scary good next year. Coach Josh Gerber's done a tremendous job rebuilding that program. A lot of confidence right now down at Norwell. Kind of wearing Norwell colors. I'm not trying to be a homer. It's just kind of what I pulled out here. But I really like what Coach Gerber's done at Norwell. They're doing really good things, building the program from the ground up with their feeder system. This is a winnable game, especially if they can get some turnovers. They kept it close last year. I think Leo had 2 or 3 turnovers last year that stalled some drives. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. But again, Leo's just fantastic. You mentioned New Haven. I don't know how much you want to talk about that game. If you want to segue into that, Jakar Williams. Yeah, if there's one guy on that roster you have to have on the field, it's Jakar Williams. I mean, he's a man-child playing quarterback. It looks like when he's out there, he's just playing with like sometimes his little brothers, and he's just throwing them to the side. He is a difference maker, and without him, it was a tall task for New Haven on the road last week for sure. So this is a game this week against kind of an old Northeast Hoosier Conference rival in DeKalb. Every time DeKalb and New Haven play, I hearken back to that night where DeKalb just put up 93 or 97 points. I mean, it was just something ridiculous. I know that didn't sit well with the New Haven folks. I also know Coach Cook, God rest his soul, did not intend for that to happen that way. It just kind of spiraled out of control. That's when DeKalb football was at, I think it's apex, back in the Jeremy Sassanella and Brad Weber days. I mean, DeKalb was loaded, and this is back before game night. And I just remember for many, many years, this game always just felt like it had a little bit of an extra tension to it. And I think some of that is, kind of dissipated through the years, Jeff. But again, it's still an old Northeast Hoosier Conference rivalry. And I know this would be a great opportunity for New Haven to get off the snide. They're 0-2, try to find a way to get back, get in the win column and get a little momentum. DeKalb, same thing. They're not playing as well as they want to be playing this year. Coach Wilcox has got a young team. He graduated a lot of seniors from last year's team. So this is another one of those games, almost like Wayne and Northrop, that you think, wow, the winner of this game really could maybe change the trajectory of their season. The loser, it's going to be hard once you go down 3 games in the loss column to get these kids to keep fighting. But both these coaches, young coaches, energetic, they're going to stay the course regardless. So, but a key game nonetheless for both programs.
Yeah, and the following week, East Noble is going to travel to DeKalb, and New Haven will be at Leo. So it's not going to get any easier for those 2 teams. And looking at East Noble, their week 2 opponent, Northwood, that game got canceled due to COVID reasons.
Yeah, and I had some communication this week with Coach Luke Amstutz, and he told me they were 100% good to go through the entire process. So they had no quarantine issues or COVID protocol issues with the football program at all. So sure, they was very disappointed that they couldn't play last week and they couldn't practice. They had their first practice, Jeff, on Wednesday, just 2 nights ago of this week, since last Tuesday, a week ago. So, I mean, think about that. There could be a little rust tonight against Huntington North. If they were playing, let's say, a Leo or something this week, think about how that could have impacted this game, taking that much time off. So Huntington North is, coming off a nice win. They've got some good football players, but this is, again, a game I think East Noble should win pretty easily. And hopefully their quarantine issues and whatnot are behind them as well.
Then lastly, Woodland's traveling to Heritage, another game of 0-2 teams. For Heritage, they have not scored a point yet this season.
Yeah, I got 2 helmets here too. Pan back over, these are brand new too. Look at this. Well, we'll just go with Heritage. I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a smaller helmet. It must have been a punter. But I love the old logo. I mean, to me, that's like vintage New England Patriots. Coach Kolkman brought this to me to the photo shoots this year, and I had to add it to the collection. And then this guy here, this is again, Woodland, just old school. I love it. The dark navy blue. I almost want to like put a GameNight logo on there and make it like a GameNight helmet, but I don't want to, be disrespectful to the Warriors. But Coach Smith sent that with his assistant coach to our photo shoot. So thank you to both of them. Speaking of my helmets, I don't know what happens when I check out of this earth. I've got like, it might be over 100, but definitely dozens of helmets. And I mean, like old Elmhurst, old Harding, old different colors helmets. I mean, it's quite a collection. My kids are going to sit there probably and be like, what are we supposed to do with all these? But hopefully they, put them out somewhere in a local restaurant or something. But getting back to your point, Heritage, Woodland, another one of those games, 0-2 versus 0-2. What are these teams? One of these teams is going to come out victorious and feel really good about themselves. In game night this week, we kind of talk a little bit about, I think, the storyline is Woodland's inability to stop the run. I mean, last week, what did they give up? It was ridiculous. 457 yards last week to Central Noble on the ground. We know what Leo did to him in week 1. Now, those are two really good running programs. Will Hoover had a monster game last week for Central Noble, the Cougars. But 457 yards is a lot of rushing in a high school football game against anybody. Heritage last week, Eric Rogers had 80 yards, I believe. If he gets a big game, there's a good picture of him there. If he has a big game, and he's very, very capable, very elusive, great burst of speed, especially once he gets to the second level, he could have a monster game tonight. He could, if he has a 150, 200 yard type game, I think Heritage finds a way to get this done. Jake Snyder, the quarterback, there's a good picture of him in game night, is a kid that just hasn't quite found his rhythm yet. Woodland, Coach Mike Smith's trying to get the Warriors offense untracked a little bit as well. They've done some nice things. They were actually leading last week early. They had a couple late scores against Leo's backup. So they at least have scored this year. Heritage has got 2 goose eggs, but against 2 really good teams in Eastside and Norwell. So this to me is a coin flip game. Again, one of those games that could totally change the trajectory of a team season. So 1-2 is a lot better feeling than 0-3, Jeff, as you know. So this is another huge game to kick off the ACAC for Woodland and Heritage. And wouldn't be surprised if this came down to the fourth quarter as well.
Well, it's like you said, Heritage taking on Eastside and Norwell, extremely tough teams. Leo and Central Noble over at Woodland. These two teams shouldn't feel too bad about where they are right now. It's where they're going to be, 4 or 5 weeks from now.
No doubt. And you look through their schedule, with the exception of, a couple outliers. Woodland's got Jay County. Heritage has Tri-County in week 6. But a lot of those other games could be winnable. South Adams doesn't seem to be quite as dominant as they were the last couple of years, especially with their quarterback going down last week. Adams Central is going to be a beast no matter what. But in Bluffton's improved team, but Southern Wells, Jay County, you would like to think those are both very winnable games for both these teams. So if it doesn't happen tonight for one of them, it doesn't mean it's not going to. They got to stay the course and keep working.
Yeah, and you talked about him earlier. Will Hoover leading the area in rushing with 435 yards on just 37 attempts and 6 touchdowns, just ahead of Tyrese Brown for Snyder.
Yeah, last second, we realized right before we went to press that we did not have Will Hoover's headshot because they weren't able to, we didn't have him at the photo shoot. So I had to reach out to David Bremer, the athletic director up at Central Noble, and he came through in the clutch, literally in the 11th hour, so we could put Will Hoover. He's got great hair. I love hair because I'm a bald man. And next week's issue hint, might have something to do with hair. But yeah, Will Hoover's really had a really good start to the season. Again, a lot of our leaders here, Jamison Coverstone, who's kind of taken over from Mason Englert. It looks like we're going to see his face a lot this year. And of course, Carson Clark atop the list. I don't know if anybody catches him. I think we're going to see Carson Clark there, provided he's healthy all season long, because the way they like to throw it around out at Luers.
Yeah, and he's got a nice lead over Jeff Becker. You'll remember last year, Jeff Becker and Deuce Taylor were 1 and 2 top passers in the state for a long time throughout the course of the regular season. So, Casey, I'm expecting another great week of football. I'm going to be out at the Carroll Northside game. I'm excited to see Jeff Becker back in action. I'm hoping that Luke Carmody gets back on the field. After he left, I think it's just his helmet fell off, but after he left the field, he never returned.
Right.
They put AJ Lazoff back there, and that is a big kid. AJ Lazoff, who's listed as a wide receiver, but they can also put him back there a running back. He's a big dude for Carroll. So I'd like to see how they get the running game more involved. And yeah, Jameson Coverstone he was sensational last week. I mean, there was times when he was catching that ball and nobody was within 7 yards of him. And credit Coverstone too. He knew what the DBs were doing and he knew how to play them. So you can see our video. He was our player of the week, and we did an extra special feature on Jameson. He had a lot of nice things to say. So
he's a Panther killer. He's a Panther killer. I mean, again, the Snyder coaches are not going to miss seeing him. He's had 2 amazing games against one of the elite programs in the state back-to-back years. So that's something that young man will be able to carry with him forever.
Then going back to Northside, Rashawn Bassett and Tay Johnson, they're brothers. And when they're on the field together, there's just this extra energy that the legends bring. Hopefully, Brayshawn can play tonight. Tay Johnson, I firmly believe, even as a sophomore, might be the most valuable player in the SAC right now.
Maybe.
It's a little scary to say, especially with guys like Jeff Becker out there. Jeff Becker has a history of success. He's been doing it since his sophomore year. Tay's got 2 years in, where Jeff's in his third. But wow, that performance against Snyder, if he can do anything close to that, it's certainly going to be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, you think about, we think of him as this electrifying receiver, and he is, but the plays he made in that Snyder game defensively were off the charts. I mean, the strip at the goal line was just impressive, not only to strip it, but to retain possession. And then the 98-yard return, he's a great returner as well. I agree with you. I mean, you could make a strong argument he might be the best overall all-around player in the area, which is saying something, because we are stacked with talent once again. There's a reason the kid's got D1 offers in 2 sports already, and he's only 15, 16 years old. There's a reason. So what we're seeing is legit. He's a special talent. Keep him healthy, get Brayshawn back at quarterback, protect him with some play calls and some safe play calls so he doesn't take a shot to that shoulder. And I think Northside can hang around in this one.
One of the things, I got to talk with athletic director Andrew Klein over at Northside this week, and he said Tay Johnson is the nicest, most respectful kid you're ever going to come across. And that goes a long way in recruiting too. I think sometimes kids don't understand that the negative body language can really affect you in recruiting. But with Tay Johnson, you have none of that. Everything I hear is he is just the nicest, most respectful kid that you're going to come across.
I can echo those sentiments exactly. At our photo shoot, it was the first opportunity I had a chance to meet him in person. He was respectful, shook hands, looked you in the eye, engaging, smiling. Didn't seem to give off this air like, oh, I'm a really great player, but he had a certain swagger to him, but it wasn't cocky, it was just confident, but he was engaging. And to your point, super nice kid. And you love to see that. I'm coaching I got roped back in, Jeff, to coach a travel baseball team, a 15U team next summer. And we're kind of just getting the pieces put together for that. And I've got kids from all over Northeast Indiana. And that's my message to them. Having an older son play college baseball up in Michigan still. These colleges can't afford to miss. They're looking at things like body language. They're looking at things like grade point average. They're looking at, do you hustle on and off the field? Do you play the game the right way? Do you do things the right way? And I can't emphasize that enough as a youth coach to my players in any sport, but currently with this baseball team, the margin is so slim, Jeff, between player A, B, and C when they're recruiting, especially in a sport like baseball where it's all partial scholarships. You better not give somebody that's watching you a reason to cross it off the list. I mean, so if you kick dirt and you throw your mitt and you show up your teammate or an umpire or a coach or a parent, somebody's taking the line and taking a black Sharpie right through your name. So don't do it. And I think that's what more youth coaches are doing. And that's, I credit a lot of our area coaches, especially in football, because I think most of these guys have the right mission statement in mind, wanting to help these kids not only play in college, beyond that, just succeed in life. And it's so important. Tay Johnson is a great example of a young athlete who does things the right way, carries himself the right way, and he's going to have great opportunities in the future.
Well, Casey, once again, looking forward to another great week of action and appreciate you coming on. Folks, make sure you pick up a copy of Northeast Indiana Game Night. You can find them out at the stadiums. And Casey, you sometimes have them at different locations like gas stations and such that they can find them?
Yep. There's the Jerry's Burger Dairy stores out south off of like Fairfield and maybe Winchester Road have some, you know, Lake Offs, Ellis Teca, B. Antonio's, a lot of those places will have a small stack. Laser X usually has a stack. Sometimes they're not there by game time, but sometimes they are. I know it's funny when the few times that I've forgotten to deliver them out at the gas stations out south, out by Wayne High School, I usually get a litany of text messages from people that I don't know that somehow have my cell phone, and they're like, "Hey, where's game night? They're not here." And then I have to make a special trip out there. But no, it's been a labor of love. 24 years in, we appreciate your support and everybody else. We couldn't do it without, advertisers and people supporting it. There's a good shot of the Fort Wayne Fire Department ad this week with the New Haven Bulldogs, who have a big one tonight against DeKalb.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I've covered high school sports in a couple different areas. And Casey, I've never seen anything like this, just the artwork. And sometimes, it's just nice to have that hard copy that you can keep for a memoir and things of that nature. But yeah, look at that cover this week, the air defense. Austin Keyser is going to be back, the great senior defensive back for Homestead up against Luers. They're going to need him against that high-powered offense. Kyle Lindsey's got that team rolling.
No doubt about it. I mean, this is a really good secondary. All five of those guys are really good players. Austin Keyser is a really, really good athlete that I think is underappreciated locally. Des Smith, same thing. I think Isaac Barkas is maybe one of the top 2 or 3 safeties in the area too. So this is the loaded secondary. Again, it's almost built to face a team like Bishop Luers. The key again will be that Bishop Luers running game with Sir Hale. If they get 150 plus, I think the Knights pull it off.
Well, my name's Jeff Mahoney with Summit City Sports. That is Casey O'Boyle with Indiana Game Night. Have a great week and enjoy the Friday night football, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jeff.